Hello, my name's Gavin. This is Genre Books, and this is week 12 of the Read What You Own challenge. The Read What You Own challenge, created by Criminoli, co-hosted by Reading This Life, Another Bibliophile Reads, and Fiber Artsy. And the premise is simple and devilish. Read a set amount of books from your own shelves before you buy any new ones. I've chosen to do 100 books. And yeah, that's going to be fine, I tell myself. I'm finding it difficult to understand the timing of this particular month. January seems to be such a long month, but the weeks themselves that January consists of zip by without me having noticed it or without me having read nearly as much as I had planned to. But let's see what I did read. I start with No Highway from Neville Shute. This is the second Neville Shute book that I've read. The first was On the Beach. And on the basis of On the Beach and this, I will be reading some more Neville Shute in the future. Although based on this book, I'm not going to be sprinting forward to try to do so. There's a lot to like in this book, and there are some flaws as well. It is also quite dated. Some of that is charming, and in fact I spent most of my time reading this with a received pronunciation voice. There are a couple of times in this book where someone starts to say something with the words, I say. And I think I might try to bring this into my day-to-day conversation when I now talk like this. But nobody does talk like that anymore, and it seems a little antiquated. Some of it is charming. Some of it, and I'm going to go with the latent misogyny, is not. And I say latent rather than blatant. There's no hatred on display here, but there is a presumed subservience. You have a character in Mr. Honey, who is this character here. He is not dynamic, but he is apparently sort of quite quietly heroic and inextricably has women falling over him. Shute is at pains to say how unprepossessing and diminutive he appears, and yet he has a Hollywood film star and air stewardess become quite smitten with him. Mr. Honey is an aircraft safety engineer, and this book is about metal fatigue. Neville Shute was an aircraft safety engineer. I think Shute has written himself into two characters in this book, one being Mr. Honey and one being Mr. Honey's boss, Mr. Dr. Scott. I don't know if this is just reflecting the times that you have two women in this book who have had careers and upon marriage stopped those careers dead in their tracks in order to support their husbands. And the third character you have is that major movie star who wants to call time on her career on her own terms, having succeeded, but feels incomplete without having settled down and fixes her gaze upon Mr. Honey. So we're stuck in this book between the grinding reality and minutiae of detail in the scientific exploration of metal fatigue and the frankly not very credible romance that blossoms. There is also a Deus Ex Machina in this book, which is, again, not entirely credible. And its reception in the scientific community, or the small scientific community represented in this book, makes it even less credible. What does come across as credible is that old world bureaucracy and the way things were done when people were talking in this accent. It's not a bad book, there are some issues with it. I've since found out this actually became a movie with Marlene Dietrich, and the character described as unprepossessing and frog-faced and diminutive and forgettable, played by Jimmy Stewart. I'm going to have to see this film. My pick this month for the Winter of Wyndham, which is Book Songs and Magic's winter-long event celebrating the works of John Wyndham, was Web. This is a book that came out 10 years or more after Wyndham's death. And as much as I like it, I think there are some problems. And the problem is that it's just too slight. It's too thin. I think there was a longer, richer novel here. And I don't know how much the fact that it was not published within his lifetime is indicative of his recognition of that fact and not wanting to press too much for it to be published, or whether it was still in his mind more of a work in progress and needed some rounding, some filling out. What's there is great. I would say if you don't like spiders, maybe think twice about reading it. I mean, the title should have given it away, and the cover probably would aid that decision. But what I really like about Wyndham is the depth of character that you get with his books, and this one was just too much plot and not enough of the character development. Again, what character is developed is great, but I wanted to see more of it. However, in this challenge, I'm not going to criticize too much for a book being short. Next, I read Heroes in Hell, a novel convened by Janet Morris and including contributions from Janet Morris, C.J. Cherry, Greg Benford, David Drake, Nancy Aspire, and Chris Morris. This is linked to my Project Rabbit Hole reading project. That sounds tautological. And specifically Bangsian fantasy. So this is definitely an underworld. This is your actual Christian hell and the people who are there. Some of them are not a surprise. Some of them are a bit more surprising. I won't talk too much about it because I will be doing another video for Project Rabbit Hole specifically on Bangsian fantasy and specifically about actual hell. The fourth book, I have about 50 pages to go for my next Marple read, which was The Mirror Cracked from Side to Side by Agatha Christie. I'm not including this, however, on my list of 100 books because I got this from the library, so it doesn't count. I am, however, reading it because I have another reading event, a self-imposed reading event, coming up in March. And I'm trying to read as much Miss Marple for that event that I'm able to. And I bumped this one up my list a little bit because it was on television over Christmas. This project is going to have me looking at the film or the TV series against the movie, and the movie disappears from the TV service midweek this coming week. So I need to get in and finish the book first. So I haven't finished it, and it doesn't count anyway. So it's what I've read this week, but it doesn't count towards the challenge, I'm afraid. All of which leaves me at 48 on my list. So with a fair wind, I will be beyond the halfway mark by the time I have this video next week. With a rounded the horn, we are on the home straight. Just quite a long home straight. One final piece of housekeeping. No Highway by Neville Shute was picked from the Tote Bag of Mild Peril. And for those who don't know, the Tote Bag of Mild Peril contains slips of paper with the names of every single book on these shelves behind me, and about 100 slips of paper just with the name of a genre or subgenre of literature. I pick the slip of paper out and I will read that book. If that book is part of a series, I will read that series. If that slip of paper is a genre, I'll be reading about that genre. The Tote Bag hasn't let me down yet. It's led me in some odd directions, and I pulled misery literature from the bag and realised that I didn't have any misery literature. That was, I wouldn't say a fun one to look at, but I ended up reading the Maria Monk book, which was new to me. The Tote Bag has not let me down yet. There is always a first time. I have a plan, for example, to read lots and lots of short books in February. Is this going to suggest something that's an absolute beast and torpedo my plans? Why is that's several? I don't want several, I want one. There you go. Ah, that is quite helpful, I think. Genre: heroic fantasy. Well, it's serendipitous to choose something about fantasy when we're about to do fantasy in February. I'm not sure how many of the fantasy books I'm planning to read are actually heroic fantasy. Hopefully one of them is, and it will just count. If not, I'm adding something to my list for February. But until then,